Hello AE Tuts Plus, my name is Ben Griggs, and today I'm going to be walking you through building this displacement map that we've used for Shapeshifter. To create this little animation, we have some water rings, a logo, and some text, followed by some of the generator options that are available in Shapeshifter and Freeform Pro. I say Freeform Pro because we can use the same displacement maps that we're building today for the Freeform Pro or the Freeform that ships with CS5 for that matter. So let's jump in and take a look at how all of these elements were made. First off, we're going to take a look. This is the displacement map that we're building today when it's applied with Freeform that ships with CS5. Now we could go in and make quite a few changes with the lights and everything like that, but that's not my concentration today. I just want to show you that we can use this displacement map for Freeform. Let me take a look over here. This is the color is actually baked into the layer that we are displacing because we don't have these reflection maps available in Freeform. So we have to create our color on the layer that we're displacing. Now this is the same displacement map we're using with Freeform Pro. With Freeform Pro we have the grid control points just like we have in Freeform. But here in Freeform Pro we also have reflection maps. We have that generator that we'll get into in a moment. And we also have access to these grid control points. So we could take any of these control points, and let me get the grid back up over here. We can take any of these control points and animate them, link them to a different type of null that's maybe got an audio reaction to it. So there's really a lot of power that can be had over here in Freeform Pro. But today we're actually going to be working in Shapeshifter. This is again the same displacement map. I believe I have some different lights or material properties here. Again, we have these rings going through, coming up to a logo, and then some text, the fun stuff, followed by a little bit of the generator action that we have. So let's go ahead and make a new composition to get started. So I'm going to use 1280 by 720. Use whatever you want. But I do want to point out in our project settings we are using 16 bits per channel. 8 bits per channel is the After Effects default, and 16 bits per channel just has a lot more color information. And let me actually rename this composition. Call it Now in our new composition, let's create a new solid, and let's just call it water layer. And let's actually just duplicate that. I'm going to press Control D. I'm going to rename it to Water Disp. And then I'm going to pre-compose that. I've done this just so I have another composition with the exact same solid, so I have the exact same pixel aspect ratio. It's not important to be the same size, but it's very important to have the same pixel aspect ratio so we don't distort any of the displacement maps that we're building. So let's come in here to the water displacement map and go ahead and start building some water. Now we can build water any way that you want, but this is just something that works out for me. I'm going to use turbulent smooth with a spline type, and let's reduce the complexity down to about 2 and transform the scale up to 250 or so. Okay. Now I have a 16-second composition, so I'm going to keyframe our evolution at 0, and at the end of the 16 seconds we'll go to 2.5, which is 2 and 180, and this is just about the right speed that I want for my water. Play around, it depends on the length of your composition, find the right settings for you. Now back here in the SS water composition, we don't actually need to see this displacement layer. But in order to apply Shapeshifter, let me go ahead and apply it. Let's see, Metal Shapeshifter. We're not going to see anything until we add lights and a camera because this is a 3D plugin. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use a default 35mm camera. You can have depth of field on if you want. And let's add a couple of lights. See, I have a 20% ambient light. And I'm also going to make 2 parallel lights that are 90% each, and all of these are white. I'm going to duplicate that one parallel light. Now to shapeshifter, if I grab the camera, we'll see by default we do have a thickness to our layer here, and this is here under 3D extrusion. We have a default thickness of 40. If I take that down to 1, then this is going to be just like a standard After Effects 3D layer that's 1 pixel thick. Now I can come down here to our displacement mapping, and I'm going to be using RGB Luma, and let's link to the water disp layer. We still don't see anything because we have no height to our displacement map, so let's bump up the height. I'm just going to use 180. And we're still not seeing too much. Everything's a little bit blown out. Let me take one of our parallel lights and just point it over to a different direction. Let me take our other parallel light, let's see, it's right here, and point it in this direction. Just grab the camera, and this is something that we'll play around with maybe a couple of times throughout the tutorial. It just depends on how things come out. I know it looks very bright at the moment, but that's going to change, so let's go ahead and do that. To get a better look here, we want to add in a reflection layer, and I have this little image that was provided by Chris from Metal.com. He's actually responsible for making Freeform, Freeform Pro, and Shapeshifter. This reflection map is a spherical reflection map. You can find a lot of reflection maps available online in various places, but I'm just going to hide that. Just like the displacement layer, we don't need to see it. I'm going to come over here to reflection mapping and select that SkyGen 1 image. Now see, things are pretty dark where they were a little bit overblown just a moment ago. So I'm going to come here to our material properties. These are just like the After Effects 3D layer material properties. I'm going to bump up the diffuse lighting and maybe play around with these other ones a bit. Increase the specular and a touch of the shininess. That will sort of bring it back down a bit. The metal, and let's see, we could also adjust reflectivity. I'm going to go on a small tangent real quick and show you something. If I take this water layer and pre-compose it, now this is the layer that we're applying Shapeshifter to. If I pre-compose this, I can put something down here, and whenever we're in our composition and we reduce the reflectivity, because by default this is 100, we're only seeing complete shininess. And when we reduce this, anything that we put down below on this actual layer will show straight through the reflection. So that's just something to keep in mind. Like, you could be putting a picture down there or something if you want to, but anyway, that's not what we're actually here for. Just something to take a look at. So back here in our water composition, that's probably a decent amount of look. I'm not liking how active this water is, so let's calm it down. We're working with the displacement maps which go from values of black and white, so if we reduce this contrast, I'm going to increase the brightness just so we can see a little better. Then we have a lot more muted noise going on in the background, so we don't have as much variance from white and black, so we're not going to have such a steep bumps happening in the water. There we go. Now I kind of like this. Again, it's going to be up to you how you want to make everything work. So in this water, let's add our water rings. Let's make a new solid and call it radio. And to this, let's apply radio waves. Now the radio waves are blue by default. Let's go ahead and change that to a white and make them quite a bit thicker. Then we also want to maybe adjust the lifespan and turn on a reflection. Now if we take a look right now, we're going to have really a lot of crazy action going on. We don't have any kind of smoothing or softening on these radio waves yet, and this actually is a very interesting kind of little animation, but just not what we're going for. So let's reduce the lifespan of these a little more. Let's maybe increase their expansion, and we don't want them to just keep coming out like this. So let's increase the frequency so that within the first second a couple of these come out, Let's keyframe that frequency and come out, let two of them come out, and reduce that back down to 1. I'm going to press U to reveal those keyframes. There we go. Now we have two coming out, and they will bounce back off. Let's copy and paste these, and now we have two sets of our rings. I'm going to press page up and just set another keyframe right here at 0, just to make sure we don't have too many coming off. Let's move that down. There we go. Now we got two in our second set. That would be good. Now what we want to do is maybe soften these, so let's go to a fast blur. With our fast blur, this is a large kind of thick line, so I want to add a lot of blur. This is up at 27. Now let's take a look, and now we have some nice smooth water coming out. Now after this, let's add in our logo. Let's go to the project panel, find the AE Tuts logo cutout, and this will be available to download in the project file. This is just the AE Tuts logo. I've taken it into Illustrator and just cut out the insides there. Now this is an EPS, it's a vector image, so let's apply the continuous rasterization to get some nice clean edges. And now let's desaturate this logo, because we are working in black and white. We don't need any kind of color information at all. Now we have two options. We can take this down to the master lightness of 0, and what this is going to do is subtract from our displacement, so that we're not being displaced at all where we have this logo. And that can be useful. It's kind of neat that we can see the water just moving straight through the letters but not the rest. But I'm going to be using something a little different. I'm going to have this add to it, so we're floating on top of the water. So this isn't quite floating on top of the water either. It's more like just a brick that's sort of sitting there in the water. So let's go to this displacement and reduce the opacity of this. I'm going to press T to get to opacity, and we're going to go down to around 40%, something like that. And what's happening now is, you see, we can see all the movements of the water. Let's get those rings out of the way, and we can see all these movements of the water right through the logo. So it's almost like it's a piece of paper or a rubber floating on top of the water and taking on all that movement. So we do want to soften up the edges of that logo a little bit. Let's add some fast blur. Now we have to add these blurs in here to build geometry around our edges. And the larger our pre-composition of displacement maps is, whenever we shrink it down, the more crisp of an edge that we're going to get. But because we are dealing with fluids here, I don't mind a slightly curved edge at all. So that's going to be good for our logo. Let's just animate that on and off. We're going to do that in two different ways. We're going to use the blurriness and the opacity. So let's double click on our blurriness. We get both of these available here. And we want our logo to start maybe coming on right about here. And it's going to take a little over a second to come on. So whenever we're having it start to come on, we're going to have very blurry, and of course coming from 0 opacity. And now as it comes in, it'll just kind of fade up like this. And let's maybe put some, I'm going to press F9 here and ease these keyframes. Then I'm going to duplicate this one set of keyframes so that our logo actually holds on for just a moment. And then we'll duplicate these beginning keyframes in order to have it fade back off. Now these are probably a little bit far apart. Let me select all of these. I'm going to press Alt and drag to try to squeeze these in a little bit. And the timing can absolutely be adjusted at the end after we've set everything up, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that right now. So let's take a look at what we have. We have our rings coming out, and as they fade off, we have a logo popping in and going back off. Now it's going off too fast. Let's go just maybe adjust these keyframes. Now after this, we want to have some text. You can put any kind of text you want. I'm just going to come in here and type fun stuff. And again, I mean, just put it whatever you want. just for an example here. That's going to be a decent size. What I'm going to do is take these exact same keyframes that we just did with the logo. I'm going to copy them, select the text layer, and let's have it start to come on right about here. Paste those, and then we have fun stuff fading in right as that comes out. Now I'm leaving the text black, and like I showed you right here with the logo, that means that we're going to eat into the surface of the water. So I mean, it's up to you. You want to have it eat in, you want to have it bump out. Of course, it's all up to you. I want it to be a little bit deeper, so let's actually change this opacity here. I want to increase the opacity of just the fun stuff, because I want it to be darker. Let's say 70, and on this other keyframe as well. So this way it's just going to eat in a little bit deeper, because we're going to have heavier differences between the two values, between this gray and this black right here. And let's go back to that composition and look. Yeah, see, now it's just a little bit deeper. And okay, I mean, there we go. We've gone from the rings to a logo to some text. And let's see, the last thing we want to do before we get into the generator is maybe build a wall here. So I mean, I don't actually really care for the wall, but that was in my example, so I want to show it to you. And I'm actually just going to take it back off, but you can keep it if you want. It's up to you. Let's go to walls and create this new solid. I'm just going to double click on the rectangle tool, and this will give me a mask that's the size of my layer. To the mask, I'm going to actually invert it and go to the mask expansion and just subtract a little bit. So now we have a little border here. To this, I'm going to add a fast blur so we get a little bit of a smoother edge, and we will leave on repeat edge pixels. Let's jump back over to SS Water, and there we have it. We've got a nice little water box. And I mean, it's up to you. If you're just following along in Freeform, then you're not going to be able to do this next part. But if you're using Freeform Pro or Shapeshifter, let's jump into making this generator action. And of course, we can be using the camera to animate all of our movements here in the meantime. So over here in the Shapeshifter, down at the very bottom, I'm just going to close all these menus. We have generator, and this is also again in Freeform Pro, so use whatever you like. I'm going to make 15 instances, but we want to be careful how many instances we use in the generator, because every instance is just adding that much more geometry, and the more geometry we have, the more likely we are to slow down or maybe cause some type of issue. So in order to animate this, I'm actually going to come right here and change our 3D transform scale, because this is pretty large, and we probably want it smaller so we can see everything. I'm going to take it down to about 50%, not 5%. My zero's sticking a little bit. Let's come back up to this one. There we go. And let's see, maybe, you see it's being a little bit thick right there because we have all of our instances, and they're all being offset there on the Z. Let's see if I move them a little further, then we have a little more space. But let's keep coming in here and create maybe some animations of some sort. Let's create some incremental rotations, X, Y, and Z. And I really haven't, honestly, I have not practiced this at all. I'm just kind of fidgeting around, and it's not hard. It's not hard to come up with something kind of neat. Now I'm going to go to deformations, and deformations is something that's available in Shapeshifter. This isn't available in Freeform Pro, but in Freeform Pro at this point you can come and start messing around with the control points and get some kind of interesting looks pretty easily with those. And this is actually what I'm going to use for our example today. Let me come up here. I'm going to press U and start adjusting everything. I had set these keyframes. Let me put this back down here to the end. And what else did we change? Let's keyframe everything that we changed. I'm going to start with the instances because, like I said, every time you add an instance, you're actually adding a lot more geometry to the scene. So I'm going to come up here before we started, and at some point over here before we start, I'm going to come press page up and reduce this back down to 1. So that way, all the way over here, we're not actually using all this geometry that we're not even seeing. Let me come back to where this had started scaling. I'm actually going to scoot this up to about 12 seconds. And let's go down to the other things we had changed. The offset Z, it doesn't really matter if we're going to keyframe this one or not, but I will. Actually, yeah. Let's put this to 120 here, and then lower it some. Let's come down to the rotations, and let's keyframe the X and Y. Scoot that down to the end. At this point they should be at 0. And the last thing we need to do is adjust the deform. So let's come over here to the deformation, amplitude. We're going to hit that keyframe, put that keyframe at the end, and right here we wanted it to be 0. Put that back down. Oops, not negative 100. There we go. And what is the other thing? Oh, we have another incremental rotation here. Let me set that keyframe, bring it down, and really, you see, just any one of these creates some very interesting stuff. But for now, yeah, this is the one we're doing. Let's put that back down at 0. And there we have it. I mean, we can add in some more, we can add in plenty of camera movement over here, and do pretty much anything you want to with our generator. But I just like to, anything we use with Shapeshifter or Freeform Pro, I like to use that generator to wipe stuff off, just because you can't do that with most other stuff. But anyway, that pretty much has it. My name is Ben Griggs, and I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you thought we saw some fun stuff. And use these techniques for anything that uses displacement mapping. If you have any questions at all, just go ahead and post them. I'll be sure to check back in and answer anything that I can to help you out. And thank you for watching.